Today we're talking about Lilith, the mother of demons, and more specifically how she lives inside of you. This is going to be an excellent stream. We're talking about the history of Lilith, dealing with the alphabet of Sirach. We're going to be talking about archetypes in general and how to access the power of Lilith that resides within your unconscious. So for those who don't know, Lilith plays into Jewish mythology as being the actual first wife of Adam, and she was created at the same time as Adam, which is different from Eve, who was created as derivative from Adam. She was created later and from his rib. And so what this represents is that Adam and Lilith were created simultaneously, and this represents equality, whereas Adam and Eve being formed later and from Adam represents more of a subservient role. And what happened is that Lilith refused to submit to Adam, and because of this, she ran from the Garden of Eden. She escaped the Garden of Eden because she would not submit to Adam. She wanted to be equal. She wanted, she said, we're equals. And Adam wasn't having any of this. Adam says that he was superior. So Eve left the Garden of Eden, and she pronounced the name of God, grew wings, and flew into the air. Now this made God very, very angry, and she refused to submit to even God. And he sent 3 angels after Lilith, and they threatened to drown her and said that she had to return to the garden or 100 of her children would die every day. Now that's the very, very quick summary of the story of Lilith. And if you haven't seen my video on Lilith, go check it out because there's a lot more to it. And it's probably as part of a playlist that you're watching this video right now. So you can go check that out. But today we're talking about not only the story of Lilith, but we're going to talk about how Lilith is inside of you and how to access the power of Lilith. And in that, we'll be talking about archetypes and the unconscious mind. Before we do that, I want to read to you from the alphabet of Sirach, from which a majority of the story of Lilith comes from. And so I'll read right now from the alphabet of Sirach, and then we'll start talking about archetypes and accessing the power of Lilith. So Lilith is very powerful as a symbol of equality because Lilith refused to submit. Some even say that Lilith was the serpent in the Garden of Eden and wanted to free Eve from the tyrannical rule of Adam and God. So this is from the alphabet of Sirach. After God created Adam, who was alone, he says, it is not good for man to be alone. He then created a woman for Adam from the earth, as he had created Adam himself, and called her Lilith. Adam and Lilith immediately began to fight. She says, I will not lie below. And he said, I will not lie beneath you, but only on top. For you are fit only to be in the bottom position. So now we see symbology basically talking about sexual positions, but in terms of power dynamics. So, what's being talked about here is sexual positions, but in terms of power dynamics, where she's like, I'm not going to lie below. And he said, I'm not going to lie beneath you, only on top. And then we see the clear implication of this when he says, for you are fit only to be in the bottom position where I am to be the superior one. So you see, yes, we're talking about sexual positions, but clearly it's in terms of who is superior. Not just in, kind of some sort of pleasurable way. There is a power play here. So Adam said, you're only fit to be on the bottom. I am to be the superior one. And Lilith responded, we're equal to each other in as much as we were both created from the earth. But they would not listen to one another. So Lilith just wanted equality. That's it. So you see where Adam was trying to be superior. Adam was like, you're only fit to be in the bottom position. I'm superior. And Lilith just wanted equality. Lilith wasn't saying you should only be in the bottom position and I'm superior. Lilith responded, we're equal. So you see, Adam represents this patriarchal symbol for dominance over woman, which is horrible. And then Lilith represents equality. So you see, Lilith doesn't even represent matriarchy or feminine dominance. Lilith represents equality. And it's said that Lilith is, a lot of people call Lilith the first feminist. And I believe there's actually a Jewish feminine magazine called Lilith because of that. Some sort of publication called Lilith. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about feminism. I did a poll on Facebook and on Instagram about saying, like, are you a feminist? And it wasn't bad. I mean, still, I think it was like 70-30, or it might have been even a little worse though. It might have been, the ratio might have been a little worse than that actually. But it just blows my mind that so many people voted that they weren't a feminist, including many women. And the thing is, I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what feminism is. Feminism doesn't mean that women are better or want to be superior. Feminism is about equality for all, regardless of gender. So to call yourself a feminist doesn't mean that you think that women are superior. Calling yourself a feminist means that you believe in equality for all genders. That's what it means. And so it doesn't matter if you are male or female, and your gender, whether you're male or female or non-binary or trans or whatever you'd like to identify as, everyone should be a feminist because it means the equality of all genders. Now, some people have twisted the word feminism and have used it incorrectly, but that's on them. So when Lilith, what the hell? Sorry, there's a mosquito. Go away. Do not suck my blood, please. When Lilith saw this, that Adam wasn't listening, she pronounced the ineffable name and flew away into the air. So basically she pronounced the name of God and flew into the air. And this is basically, I'm going to go fast because we have a lot to talk about. But basically, check out my other video on Lilith if you want more details. But basically, this means that she's not even subservient to God because she's pronouncing the name that should not be uttered, which is God's name. So she's basically proclaiming herself divine in a certain way. And again, huge connections to Lucifer. And we'll talk more about that when we start talking about archetypes. But Adam stood in prayer before his creator. Oh, Jesus. Sovereign of the universe, he said, the woman you gave me has run away. Oh, poor baby. Well, maybe if he weren't such a dick, she wouldn't do that. Fucking asshole. At once, the Holy One, blessed be he, sent 3 angels, Sinoi, Sansinoi, and Semangaloth, to bring her back. They sound all pretty shitty. Said the Holy One to Adam, if she agrees to come back, what is made is good. If not, she must permit 100 of her children to die every day. And the God of the Bible has this really awful tendency to want to kill children. He does it all the time. If you look in the Bible, he's constantly killing kids. It's really gross and weird and doesn't even make any sense because at that point you're punishing the kids for they haven't done anything wrong. You know, like in Egypt when he punishes the Pharaoh for having all the firstborn children of Egypt die. Not only the firstborn children of Egypt of humans, but of the animals as well. So it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. You're not only killing innocent children, but you're killing animals. Anyway, crazy, absolutely insane. Anyway, the angels left God and pursued Lilith, whom they overtook in the midst of the sea, in the mighty waters wherein the Egyptians were destined to drown. Yeah, more people dying there. They told her God's word, but she did not wish to return. Then the angel said, we shall drown you in the sea. So basically what happens is that Lilith gets dubbed as a demon and gets feared. You know, she has a lot of roots in like the myths of vampires and the succubus, where she's said to visit men in the night and steal their seed to create more demon children, and that she steals and kills like the children of pregnant women in revenge for her children that are killed. Anyway, she gets twisted into this really horrible demonic creature, and you can see where this clearly shows how the world, a patriarchal religious world, views a feminist. Someone who wants to be equal. It views them as demonic. They get dubbed a demon. They get dubbed evil. And again, check out my other videos. I don't want to get too much into it, but there are so many sexist verses in the Bible, including in the New Testament, that uses, you know, Eve being created second and from a derivative of man and being, you know, tempted by the serpent as a reason why women can't teach in churches and they must remain quiet and that men are superior and they have to submit to men in everything, which is still taught to this day. I was taught that as a Christian. I grew up as a Christian. That's not like, oh, well, they taught that hundreds of years ago. That doesn't still, yes, it does. That's taught every day. Churches every day, they teach that. So I don't think people realize how incredibly sexist most of these religions are. Let us see. So what's really important to understand and take away from this is, now, did this actually happen? No, it didn't actually happen. This is a story, but it shows us very powerful symbols and metaphors. And so what Lilith isn't an actual, being that God created with Adam who flies around. No, what Lilith is an archetype. Lilith is a structure, a symbol that represents equality, liberation, and righting injustices. This is the archetype of Lilith. And it exists within you, within your unconscious as well as the collective unconscious. It's a part of you, and it's a part of all of us. It is a structure. And we're going to talk about more what this means. And we're going to look at this, and it's great. It's awesome. It's really good because you have this power within you, this power of Lilith. But before we do, let's just get a quick summary of what archetypes are in general. This is a very involved topic. So once again, you want to know more about it, look at my playlist called Actualizing Your Higher Self, Inner Star Actualization, something like that. There's a playlist on my channel called something more or less like that. It talks about archetypes and what they are. But as a quick, brief summary, let's talk about archetypes and what they are. If you imagine your mind in its totality. Now, in Hyperionism, this is you as a monadic mind. So in Hyperionism, you are an eternal monadic mind. And so that is the higher self. You as a whole, you as a mental unity. That's the higher self. And then within you, your entirety, there are various archetypes that exist within your mind that are different power structures that have different purposes that interact with each other. And you don't necessarily know that they exist, but they run in the background, in the unconscious, directing your life. And one of the goals in Hyperionism is to make these archetypes integrated and bring them into consciousness so you can be consciously unified and integrated rather than just potentially or implicitly. We want to make it explicit. So again, this might seem rather abstract, but let's use a metaphor to break this down. So if imagine you as a mind in your entirety, imagine that like a computer. Now imagine that archetypes are various programs that run on that computer. So you are the computer yourself, but you have these programs that run on the computer that allow the computer to operate. The programs aren't separate from the computer. The programs are the computer. They're parts of the computer. So archetypes that reside in the unconscious are part of you. Archetypes are like programs of your mind that run and execute various functions and serve various purposes. Just like different programs on your computer run and serve various purposes. Now, some of these programs are explicit. For example, if you're going to play a video game, you'll boot the video game up and you can see it. You know that video game is running. However, there's tons of programs running in the background that you're not aware of. You don't know that they're running. I mean, unless, you really examine your task manager or something, but you know what I mean? You don't know that they're running, but they're contributing to the workings of your computer, the operation of your computer. So you as a mind, have archetypes, different structures. You have all these different structures, right? The ego is a structure. And the archetypal core of the ego is actually the higher self. And to be technical, the ego is a complex, but we won't get into that. The persona is another structure that you're aware of. But then underneath that, we have archetypes. Now, archetypes run in the background within your unconscious, and generally you're unaware of them. Most people aren't. And that's why in Hyperionism, we talk about the archetypes of the shadow self, the mirror self, and the power self. These are very powerful archetypes that we work with and bring into the conscious mind to become whole. And they serve various functions. The shadow self is a reservoir for all the different things that have been condemned by society. It's the reservoir of repression. The mirror self is your inner opposite and is a reflection of your ego self. And the power self is your inner power that allows you to tap into your drive and will and self-actualization. But we're not going to get into that too much there. That's in the playlist that I mentioned on inner star actualization. What's important to realize that we have all these various archetypes. Now, we talked in Hyperionism, we talk about these three a lot because we can sort of generalize all the archetypes into three, but there's really many, 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 many different archetypes. But it's easier to generalize them into three. Just like the brain, there's many different parts and functions to the brain. But if we want to generalize and talk about it in an easy model, we can talk about the triune brain theory with the brain stem, the limbic system, and the neocortex, or the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and the neocortex. Now, is this a perfect model? No, it's not. But it helps us to simply understand things without, taking years of courses in neuroscience and whatnot. Same thing with the inner star actualization and three archetypes. In Hyperionism, we want to transmit this information as powerfully and easily as possible. And this three archetype model is a very easy, simplified way to do this for people to understand easily. Now, that being said, Lilith is an archetype. She is one of these, and that's the thing. With these archetypes, we can assign to them symbols, because the unconscious mind communicates in symbolism. The unconscious doesn't use words. It doesn't say, hey, how you doing? I'd like to talk to you today. When you go to sleep and dream, your dream world is constructed by archetypal imagery and unconscious imagery. That dream world is a world generated and created by you. And your unconscious communicates through symbols. Again, when you're asleep and dreaming, you're having a communication with your unconscious in that dream world, but it doesn't use language. It's not going, hey, how you doing? I'd like to tell you something right now. I really think that you should be, probably working on your feminine side more because you're really repressing it. This is causing you to lash out at women. No, that's not going to happen. You might instead encounter a figure of a woman in your dream who is trying to, let's say, get you to trying to convince you to perhaps wear a dress or something. That's just an example off the top of my head. Your unconscious communicates through symbols, images, and metaphors, not through words. And the Lilith is a symbol that we can give to an image, a symbol, and an image and a symbol that we can give to the system, the structure that deals with liberation, that deals with equality, and deals with righting injustices. And this is very powerful. And to better understand this, because again, it might seem a little abstract to most people, but the thing is that when you bring images to something, it can make it more powerful. For example, if you're feeling like someone's walking all over you, maybe you're with your boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever, and maybe they're treating you very, very unfairly. Maybe they're assholes. Maybe they're very toxic and they're gaslighting you or being abusive or whatever. What you can do is actually tap in to that power that's within you. But you know what's an easy way to do that is imagining summoning Lilith, or imagining yourself becoming Lilith. And of course, like you're not actually summoning Lilith to come possess you or something. But this is what's happening, is that you've associated that power structure with Lilith. You understand what Lilith is and Lilith represents. And by becoming Lilith, you can tap into that power and be like, you know what? Fuck you. I'm not going to take this. Like, I'm out of here. And just like Lilith left the Garden of Eden when Adam wouldn't listen to her, you can tap into the power, that archetype that lies within you, and become Lilith, tap into Lilith and be like, you know what, fuck you. You're treating me very abusively. I'm out of here. I'm leaving this relationship. Just like Lilith left the garden. So do you see how we're assigning symbols, motifs, imagery, and metaphors to certain structures? Now we're going to take a look at this article that I think is a fucking fantastic article. I haven't read the whole thing. I went over it briefly when I was preparing for this, but let's take a look at this And I think it really illustrates what we're talking about here today, the archetype of Lilith, and how you can use it to tap into that power within you, and that it is a part of you. And again, that's the thing. If you don't necessarily identify with Lilith, for example, you don't have to just use Lilith. Another powerful archetype that's very, very similar is the symbol of Lucifer. So Lucifer rebelled against God because Lucifer wanted equality. Lucifer rebelled against God because God placed himself higher. And when Lucifer fell to Earth, he was also trying to tell humans that they could become like God by acquiring knowledge. So Lucifer is also another archetype that relates to liberation, equality, and righting injustices. And the thing is, you pick the archetype that resonates with you. You don't have to use one. You don't have to use the other. You could use an archetype from Greek mythology. You could use an archetype from a video game. You could use an archetype from a movie. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You see, these are just about using symbols to communicate with your unconscious and bring out that power within you. And you want to do and choose the one that works the best for you. So it's not like that's what a lot of people get the wrong idea. They're like, oh, well, I guess I have to pray to Lilith now because she's an actual being. No, these are symbols and metaphors and imagery and motifs that you apply to structures that are within you to help bring them out. And it's very powerful to do that because your unconscious deals in metaphor. And even, for example, like you can use this type of thing all the time. Like, for example, if you are wanting to be more vulnerable with someone, for example, if you're wanting to be more vulnerable, you can imagine yourself, in your mind, imagine yourself sort of taking armor off of yourself, removing armor, and to put you in that mode of being more vulnerable, more exposed, and realize you don't have to have that wall or that barrier up with this person that you want to be more vulnerable with. But it doesn't have to be armor. You could imagine something else completely. You could imagine taking down a brick wall or something else. So you see, it's the symbols that you're working with that allow you to do this. And Lilith just happens to be a very powerful symbol for liberation, and particularly women's liberation and feminism. Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be that. It can just be liberation in general. But women's liberation is very powerful. Associated with Lilith, and that's one that you can tap into and use if it resonates with you. So let's bring this up. Let's talk about this because we want to make sure that this gets done in a reasonable amount of time. And let's bring this up. This is a beautiful image of Lilith, by the way. And you can imagine Lilith however you want. You can imagine her like this, which is sort of more of a seductive way, or you can imagine her in a completely different way. You can imagine her, armored and with a trident or whatever. You can imagine Lilith however you want. And I got someone on the other day saying something like, well, why do you portray Lilith in such a sexualized way? And doesn't that go against what you're talking about? No, it doesn't at all. Women can be powerful and sexual. It is the patriarchal society that condemns the sexuality of women. So there's nothing wrong with women being sexual. There's nothing wrong with anyone being sexual. Consensual, of course, and everything that goes along with that. Obvious, use common sense. But there's nothing wrong with it. And to try and say that, oh, well, if women are going to be equal to men or intelligent or whatever, well, they can't be sexual. No, that's fucking bullshit. They can be whatever they want to be. And fuck you if you think otherwise. That's just so inane and just contributes to a patriarchal mindset and a misogynistic mindset. And be however one wishes to express themselves. So, and that's the thing, is that the patriarchy exploits women's sexuality while also condemning it. You notice that? Like, the patriarchy will use women's sexuality for their own needs and capitalistic gain, such as in commercials and advertisements. Oh yeah, they'll sexualize the hell out of it. But as soon as women start using sexuality for their own liberation, such as in S work, I can't say it because you see how bullshit it is. I can't even say it. That just shows you how systemic the patriarchal sexual condemnation of women is ingrained in the society. Is I can't even say it. I can't even talk about it. But as soon as women start using sexuality for their own liberation and for their own empowerment, guess what? Suddenly it's censored. It's wrong. And somehow no longer acceptable. But do it in front of a Mercedes-Benz or to sell a hamburger, oh, it's fine. So you see, it's absolutely 100% bullshit. So you can be sexual, you can be non-sexual, you can be however the fuck you want. And I'm sure YouTube and Facebook hate all the words I'm saying right now, but I don't give a fuck. Like this is really important, and I get so sick of dodging these damn algorithms. It's a nightmare. But anyway, I like this image of Lilith. I think it's very cool. I like it a lot because she seems very empowered, very contemplative, and I like it. Anyway, let's continue here. So this is an awesome article by Huffington Post, which is originally posted on International Women's Day. It was originally posted there, but let's read this, and this really elucidates what we've been talking about here. So each of us has a little bit of Lilith in us. A bit of a voice this is great. A bit of a voice when silence is expected of us. A bit of a desire for freedom from the conventional fences others erect around us. A bit of a need for equality when we've been taught as early as when we were children or young girls that we're not quite equal. Yet we all possess a bit of Lilith's unacceptable rebelliousness in us, which, believe me, requires more than a bit of courage. So you see, this is something that exists within you, and we can use the symbolism of Lilith to unlock it, to access it, to bring it out. See, my Lilith revealed herself. See, this is great. My Lilith revealed herself when I immigrated to America and decided to go back to school as a married woman and a mother of young kids. See, my Lilith revealed herself. And what does this mean? It's just a part of her. The piece of me that's not going to take shit revealed itself when, etc., etc. And you don't have to be, it doesn't matter what you identify as. You can identify as male, female, non-binary, trans. Excuse me, it doesn't matter. Everyone has access to this. It's within everyone. So my Lilith revealed herself when I went back to school as a married woman. When I became a writer and began creating strong-willed female characters with big dreams and the courage to realize these dreams despite the many obstacles they had encountered on their way. In order to succeed, each and every one of us must have a bit of Lilith in us, sometimes a bit and sometimes more than just a bit. And my Lilith reared her head up when I was told I would not survive divorce, that I would be ostracized from my Persian community, and that I would lose everything and live in shame and poverty for the rest of my life. A man's betrayal is not a big deal, they told me. A man needs more than one woman. That is his right. A wife needs to keep quiet and count her blessings. Go buy yourself designer clothes, fine jewelry, smile, look pretty for your husband. What else do you want? You see a very big patriarchal mindset, and some people who have been lulled into a somnambulistic sleep will just go along with the patriarchal dream that has been systemically erected around us, and others it will wake up that archetype of Lilith and it will come forth into a blaze of fury. Well, what I wanted was entirely different. I not only wanted to survive the divorce, but I wanted to write a novel in which I'd express my rage at the inequalities women suffer. I was hoping that the process would make me whole again. And see this, I love this also, this idea of becoming whole, because that's such a huge part of Hyperionism and the integration of archetypes is making the unconscious conscious so that you can become whole. Because guess what? Lilith is within each and every one of us, even if someone doesn't want to acknowledge that it is there. So someone, say a woman who does give up their rights and is going along with the patriarchy, they still have Lilith within them, but guess what? It's being repressed. And so that can start a rage within and express itself in a number of ways without them even consciously realizing it. It can come out as rage. It can come out as like addiction problems. It can come out as anger and even like violence. So that's what it means to make the unconscious conscious, is you want to know these archetypes, these structures that are within you, and make sure you're working with them and integrating them and not working against them. You don't want to identify with them, because that's a mistake. That's called archetype possession. Okay, so that's important. When you become Lilith, you're not identifying with Lilith eternally. You're using her power for a moment. You don't want to permanently identify with Lilith. You don't want to permanently identify with any archetype, because all archetypes become negative when you just wholly identify with one. That would be like just using one program on your computer forever and not letting any of your other programs run. That's when, very dark parts of that, a lot of problems arise from that, okay? You don't want to, that's becoming archetype possessed rather than integrated. There's a difference between being possessed and integrated. Integrated means having them all come into consciousness and working together. Possessed means one that you identify with, and that's it. That's negative. That you want to identify with the shadow, not become shadow possessed. Becoming shadow possessed is like someone who will just be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go out fucking drinking every night, and I don't give a fuck about my job, and I don't give a fuck about my kids, and I don't give a fuck about any responsibilities. I'm just want pleasure, 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 and nothing else. Like, that's shadow possession. That's not good. You want to be able to enjoy life. You want to enjoy pleasure. Sometimes you want to work with your shadow, but you don't want to become shadow possessed. Anyway, the woman writing this article wants to write a novel in which they'd express, who wrote this, by the way? The name escapes me for a moment. Dora. So Dora wanted to write a novel in which she'd expressed her rage at the inequalities women suffer, tapping into that archetype of Lilith. And I was hoping that process would make me whole again. That desire for unity, because we all, whether we know it or not, desire unity. So, and this is when I began writing my latest, and oh man, I gotta keep these shorter. Don't just, I'm gonna move on, but just caveats to the we all desire unity thing, this asterisk next to that. Anyway, this is when I began writing my latest novel, Scent of Butterflies. I created Soraya, a staunch feminist who reflects the strength and commitment to equality that Lilith represented. And then she goes on a little bit to just be like, yes, I know you're probably rolling your eyes and saying, Lilith, she was a demon, a dark creature of the night, wasn't she? And then she goes on to explain who Lilith was. And I think we did that enough. We understand who Lilith was. And she gets to the part where Lilith won't submit to Adam. And she says, here then lay the problem the increasingly patriarchal society of the time had to grapple with. What was to be done with Lilith, this rebellious woman who had the nerve to forget her proper place as a submissive companion to Adam and always, always a step or two below him? The solution came to the wise men after a long night of sipping homemade wine while scratching their heads under their velvet skullcaps. There it was, the answer to their dilemma right in front of them in the second creation in Genesis 2. Here Adam is alone again, and the Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. So now we get Eve, who's branded as Adam's helper rather than his partner. And we go on to see how woman is now in a subservient role, lesser than man, and taken out of man, and the wise men had Eve. And you know what's really interesting to see that even though it's a whole toxic story, it is really interesting to see that even though it's all a toxic story, the woman was removed. Even if we're talking about Eve, she was removed from Adam. So you see that Adam is not whole because Adam had his feminine side splintered off and removed. So you see, even in their attempts to make a story about subservience, right? Because you had a story where Adam and Lilith were created equally at this via the same dirt, and which is anyway. But Lilith rejects Adam, and she goes off, and so to rectify this, they have the story where Eve is created from man. But you see, even in this, you have now man being fractured because he's lost his feminine side. So you see, you can't really escape the unconscious, even when you're trying to create a story that's like patriarchal, though there will still be that element of, oh, well, even though it's a horrible story. Anyway, I think you get what I'm getting. You see where I'm getting at. no matter what happens, we all have that. And that's the thing too. Like men, that's the mirror self. If you're a man, I identify as non-binary, by the way. My pronouns are they, them. But if you identify as a man, you have a feminine aspect within you, within the mirror self. I don't even like talking in terms of male and female because it's confusing, but we live in a society that has created these terms and used them a specific way. So yes, every man has a feminine side and every woman has a masculine side. And in Hyperionism, this is the exploration of the mirror self. But it goes beyond just the male-female polarity. If you're non-binary, you also still have a mirror self. But I won't get into that. Check out my playlist on inner star actualization. So continuing here, Dora says, and voila, the wise men had Eve, the subservient woman they were looking for, the woman who would replace Adam's first wife. And what about Lilith? What were they to do with her? Well, she was conveniently demoted to the level of a she-demon. So to sort of, make her, to show how despicable Lilith was, they made her into a demon of the night. But what's also very cool, I think, is that Lilith was associated with the sea and wanting to be drowned beneath the sea. And the sea is an archetypal image of the unconscious. And do you see how cool that is? I mean, you see how this unconscious archetypal imagery is all over the place. They wanted to drown Lilith beneath the sea. And the sea is an archetypal image for the unconscious. They wanted to take the feminine power of liberation and equality and drown it, repress it into the unconscious. And that's exactly what happened. Now we have every single one of us have Lilith that has been drowned and repressed beneath the sea of the unconscious, but we must raise her up into consciousness. And then Dora concludes by saying, but it is a different day and time now. Why not give Lilith her rightful place in history as the first feminist who claimed herself equal to Adam and refused to become subservient, who saw Adam's relationship with Eve as an unacceptable betrayal. In short, she demanded to lie next to him and not under him, be his partner rather than simply his helper. She demanded to be considered a woman in her own right. Great article. I love this article. Go check it out. Go read it yourself. It's on the Huffington Post if you want to read it, by Dora Levy. I haven't read her book, but apparently she wrote a book called The Scent of Butterflies and another book called The Last Romanoff. So very, very cool. And I applaud that. And I think that depicts extremely well the idea of each and one of us having that archetypal structure within us, because we all have that within us. It doesn't matter if that story of Lilith was never written. Doesn't matter if we were aliens on another planet. That archetypal structure still exists, and we use the symbol of Lilith to be able to access it. And everyone should be proud to call themselves a feminist. And again, that word has been absolutely twisted. And in Hyperionism, I often talk about women's liberation, just because, oh my God, I got to explain what feminism is every time because people are ridiculous. But it shouldn't be a word that someone is afraid or ashamed to use. I proudly call myself a feminist, and you should too, because feminism is not the seeking of a matriarchal order. A feminist perspective is the downfall of the patriarchy so that all can be equal regardless of gender. So that's really important to remember. And if someone is using the word feminist in a different way, they've really lost the spirit and the meaning of feminism. And that's not okay, because it's not a matriarchal structure. It is the destruction of a patriarchal structure for equality. And again, if you want to avoid semantic debates all day long, I often, like I said, use women's liberation, just so I don't have to get into debate of what feminism actually means, because that's fucking annoying. But in the end, we all have that power within ourselves. We should be proud to have that power within ourselves. And we should all use that archetype to be able to create a new world. Imagine all of us together as Hyperions accessing that archetype of Lilith to create new Terra, a world where there is equality for all, regardless of sex and gender and race, and creating this world based on the the resurgence of that power rather than the repression of that power. We can use that, the demon that God tried to drown beneath the sea, we can now raise up from the sea beneath the waters again in each and every single one of us to destroy the order that put her there, us, because really it's us, to destroy that patriarchal order that repressed and drowned us beneath the sea. We can rise again and use that same power that they tried to destroy the order that exists now and create a new order, the Hyperion New World, New Terra. So, how'd I do? How are we good on time? Hopefully we are. But I don't really care, honestly. That's a really important topic. And it's really one. There are certain topics that really fire me up. And one of the ones that does very much is when it comes to gender liberation. And women's liberation plays a big part in that because women have been given a terrible... it's just been really terrible. They've been repressed and suppressed at every turn. And the world has suffered for it. We don't get to learn from many of the wonderful perspectives of women that we could have throughout history, throughout philosophy, throughout, writing of all kinds, because it was constantly marginalized and repressed, or women just didn't have the opportunity to be able to get an education or have a place of authority to be able to write these books or to be able to take them seriously. And I think that is a huge injustice because the world has suffered for it. We as a whole have suffered. This patriarchal order is disgusting because they're shooting themselves in the foot. The world is being more destroyed because we have missed the female perspective in so much of the world. I think it's a tragedy that when I go and I want to read philosophy, there are very, very, very few female philosophers that I can read from because they've been marginalized, because they haven't had the opportunity to have the education, or because they were in a place where they weren't able to be promoted to a place of authority to be able to have their work taken seriously, which I think is an absolute atrocity and a degradation to the entire world, the entire planet, and humanity as a whole. So I'm going off again, but as I said, let's build a better world and let's bring from what was once beneath the sea into the light of day. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports on Patreon, especially Cassidy, Alana, Renaissanceri, Michael, Alan, Evie, and Angela. Everyone who supports, you guys are awesome. If you've ever enjoyed my work, if you felt like you've gotten something or learned something from me, or from my work, from my videos, consider supporting on Patreon. It helps out a lot, and you help me out, I help you out, we can help the world out. It's a great feedback loop, it works. And you'll get access to our weekly secret live streams and our hidden Discord server, the Citadel, and it means a lot. I appreciate it very much. The link is right over here.